Tonight on NewsCenter, President Park Geun-hye wakes up to her first day in Washington. First on her itinerary, a bilateral summit with U.S. President Barack Obama, to be followed by a series of one-on-ones as well as a trilateral meeting. Candidates hit the campaign trail. The first day of April 13th parliamentary election campaigning kicks off. Clearly a three-party game with promises, promises, and some more promises. And Korea's Constitutional Court upholds a 2004 legislation that toughened punishment on prostitution. We have the details. NewsCenter begins right now. It is 9 a.m. in Washington, 2 p.m. in London, and 10 on a Thursday night here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang News Center. President Park Geun-hye kicks off her first day in Washington this Thursday. Of course, she's there to take part in the fourth and final nuclear security summit. Now, during her stay in the U.S. Capitol, the South Korean leader plans to garner stronger international support on pressuring North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons program. Our Song Ji-sun is traveling with the president, and she joins us from Washington. Now, Ji-sun, not only President Park, but world leaders are arriving one by one to get together for the NSS 2016, I'm sure.
Hello, Kanyang. More than 50 world leaders and the heads of international organizations like the IAEA and UN have gathered here in Washington for the last of 4 nuclear security summits. The leaders will follow up on and take stock of the past 3 summits and work on ways to better secure nuclear safety in the future. President Park Geun-hye's multilateral diplomacy will take center stage at this year's Nuclear Security Summit in Washington as she arrived in the U.S. Capitol Wednesday local time. Before the official summit programs begin on Thursday, President Park will start the day with a one-on-one with U.S. President Barack Obama. The two will then be joined by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for trilateral talks, where the leaders will discuss countermeasures and sanctions on North Korea for its recent nuclear and missile provocations. Following a bilateral meeting with Abe, President Park will also hold in-depth discussions on Pyongyang with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The North Korean nuclear issue is not on official agenda at the Nuclear Security Summit, as the safe management of nuclear fuel and better protecting the world from nuclear terror threats are the main goals. But as Pyongyang's 4th nuclear test and long-range missile launch earlier this year once again threaten global peace and security, President Park will seek to strengthen international support and cooperation to quash North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Also note that this will be the first time that the world leaders are gathered in the same group since North Korea's 4th nuclear test on January 6. President Park will not want to waste this opportunity, both at one-on-one sessions and during official programs at the Nuclear Security Summit, to firmly discourage North Korea from pushing forward another provocation like a 5th nuclear test. This has been Song Ji-sun reporting from Washington. Back to you guys in Seoul.
Thank you, Ji-sun. Now, meanwhile, in a written interview prior to the 2-day Nuclear Security Summit in Washington, President Park Geun-hye said she will continue to keep the squeeze on North Korea through sanctions rather than dialogue, as it is, quote, the only way to ultimately achieve genuine peace by inducing changes in the North. The South Korean leader also emphasized that Beijing, Pyongyang's only major ally, remains key to convincing the regime that it will face unbearable, severe consequences if it continues nuclear tests. So it's really no wonder that when President Park Geun-hye sits down for bilateral talks with her counterparts from the U.S., Japan, and China, she is expected to delve into the issue of denuclearizing North Korea. For more on what's likely to top the discussions table during the South Korean leaders' one-on-ones, here's our Connie Kim.
The growing threat of a nuclear-armed North Korea will be the main item on the agenda for South Korean President Park Geun-hye during back-to-back summits with the leaders of the U.S., Japan, and China in Washington on Thursday. Prior to a trilateral meeting between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, President Park and President Obama will likely reaffirm their commitment in denuclearizing Pyongyang. In order to bring about substantial outcome, experts say Seoul must bring up a specific agenda to Washington.
Most agreements between South Korea and the U.S. were made by request of Seoul. The most important point when it comes to North Korea's nuclear issues is whether Washington's nuclear umbrella will cover South Korea as well. Seoul must be specific in its calls to give a strong message to Pyongyang.
Cooperation between President Park and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on pressuring Pyongyang is expected to accelerate following progress on one of the most contentious issues between them, the settlement on the so-called comfort women issue reached late last year. However, the two may still engage in discussions on the implementation of the landmark deal in the wake of Tokyo's denials of the fourth nature of its wartime sexual slavery program. When the South Korean leader sits down for a one-on-one meeting with her Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, President Park will focus on reaffirming China's cooperation on denuclearizing the North. The possible deployment of the U.S. missile defense system known as THAAD in South Korea is likely to be up for talks, but experts doubt any tangible outcome will come out from the bilateral meeting.
The THAAD issue is very important between South Korea and China. However, at the same time, the deployment of THAAD issue is very important issue between the United States and China. So I think all parties need more time to coordinate the different national interests.
The back-to-back summits will be President Park's first meetings with her regional counterparts since North Korea's nuclear test and long-range ballistic missile launch. And the results are expected to shape the way how leaders deal with North Korea's nuclear provocations in the future. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
We now take a look at what is expected of the trilateral summit between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, which is set to take place in less than 2 hours' time. According to our Han Da-eun, strengthening cooperation on the implementation of the latest North Korea sanctions is also likely to take center stage here.
On the sidelines of the fourth Nuclear Security Summit, President Park Geun-hye, U.S. President Barack Obama, and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will hold a trilateral summit at midnight Friday, Korea time. The meeting, which last took place in 2014, is garnering extra attention as it comes after the landmark South Korea-Japan agreement on wartime sex slaves that has thawed the icy relations between the two neighboring countries. Amid the conciliatory atmosphere, the three nations are expected to focus on strengthening implementation of the latest sanctions on North Korea.
Ways to boost three-way cooperation in the execution of North Korea's sanctions will likely take center stage during the talks. Strengthening trilateral security ties will also be part of the summit agenda.
Most experts say the summit will be a chance for the three nations to reconfirm their stance against North Korea's provocations rather than coming up with a new strategy for dealing with the North.
Beijing has taken part in the international sanctions on North Korea, while Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo have also imposed separate individual sanctions. Against this backdrop, no new strategy or agreement is expected. They will focus on making sure the North Korea sanctions are fully implemented.
While the three leaders will try not to provoke China too much, experts say the biggest challenge for South Korea will be to boost ties with the U.S. and Japan, while at the same time maintain healthy relations with China. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Well, as mentioned earlier, this year's Nuclear Security Summit is the fourth and the final. Over the last 6 years, more than 50 nations have gathered in Washington, Seoul, and The Hague to try and secure the world from nuclear terrorism. Our Kwon Jang-ho takes a look at the footprints it leaves behind in the world, as well as South Korea.
Since 2009, nuclear material that could have been used to make over 150 nuclear weapons has been disposed or secured. Highly enriched uranium has been removed from 13 countries. Radiation detection equipment has been installed at 329 international checkpoints to combat trafficking of illegal nuclear material. And 31 highly enriched uranium reactors have been shut down or converted to operate with safer, low-enriched uranium fuel. These are some of the major achievements that have come from the Nuclear Security Summit, which was set off by US President Barack Obama when he gave his Nobel-winning speech 7 years ago. Since then, the Nuclear Security Summit has been aimed at making the world safer from the threat of nuclear terrorism. But experts are divided on whether the summit itself can be seen as an overall success.
The U.S. and Obama's call for a world without nuclear weapons did not necessarily receive widespread international support. Some have said these summits were too U.S.-led, and some nations have felt they were unnecessary, while other organizations were already in the position to deal with nuclear issues.
Many states have made great efforts to reduce the security and safety issues in the world. So I think these kind of measures have been, in more detail have been implemented not only in the summit meeting but into a more work hands levels, government officials level.
For South Korea, the summits have also had a different significance. In 2012, Seoul was host to the second NSS, which heightened the nation's global image and reputation, as well as establishing itself as a major player in nuclear affairs.
For non-militaristic development of nuclear technology, South Korea is known as a world leader, so it's right for us to take part in a wide international discourse on nuclear safety.
But South Korea's role in the NSS has always been against the backdrop of North Korea's nuclear threat. Although the regime's nuclear program has never been a main focus of the summit talks, Pyongyang has always had a looming presence in the meetings. The previous installments of the NSS offered South Korea with the chance to meet with other world leaders, such as the US and China, on the sidelines to discuss how to deal with the regime. With the fourth and final NSS underway, what's next for the summit? Once Obama leaves office, it's unclear whether his successor would continue with the meetings. The NSS has set the tone for other nations to actively pursue nuclear safety, but more efforts are needed if there is going to be a lasting legacy.
What matters is how to implement, how bring the cooperations of the international community in implementing these agenda, not how to make a more important agenda itself. So I think from now on, the summit meetings is not as important as the bureaucratic level meetings, which is more about and focusing on the implementation itself.
Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
U.S. President Barack Obama and Chinese President Xi Jinping will hold their one-on-one summit on Thursday on the sidelines of this week's Nuclear Security Summit in Washington.
There obviously are a wide range of issues that the United States and China are able to effectively coordinate on. The most example of that recently is that, our efforts to work together to isolate and apply further pressure on the North Korean regime for their destabilizing activities on the Korean Peninsula.
The White House announced that joint efforts to step up pressure on an increasingly belligerent North Korea will be a key focus of the talks. Pundits say President Xi is likely to propose restarting the long-stalled six-party talks to discuss the issues of denuclearization together with forging a peace treaty that would replace the decades-old armistice agreement on the Korean Peninsula. The two leaders are expected to discuss the militarization of the South China Sea, cybersecurity, and China's human rights record. It is campaign time. Candidates running in the April 13th general election hit the campaign trail early this morning. In fact, precisely when the clock struck 2400 hours on the first day of the official campaign period. Our Shin Se-min accompanied them on the trail.
Seconds after the clock struck midnight, the candidates representing the country's three main political parties hit the streets, marking the beginning of the 13-day campaign period ahead of the general election on April 13th. They spoke with merchants about the difficulties they confront in the face of slow economic growth and heard from young Koreans struggling to start up a business. The three parties are laser-focused on winning support in crucial districts in the Seoul metropolitan area, a key battleground accounting for nearly half of the parliamentary seats up for grabs. The chairman of the ruling Saenuri Party, Kim Moo-sung, visited 10 different districts around the capital, supporting the Conservative Party's candidates.
We're staying all night up to fight and secure a majority in parliament. Are you with us?
The interim leader of the main opposition Minju Party of Korea, Kim Jong-in, stressed the importance of this year's election.
The April election should be a referendum on the ruling party and the government's failure to boost the economy. Let's work to fix the things that have gone wrong.
The founder of the minor opposition People's Party, An Chol-soo, stuck to his message of a new politics to overhaul Korea's political system.
This election will determine whether we hold on to the two-party system or shift to a three-party system and bring about change.
With the parties in full campaign mode, each party has its own strategy for different regions around the country. The ruling Saenuri Party is aiming for the largest piece of the pie in the Seoul metro area, putting its heaviest hitters out on the campaign trail, while the main opposition party is looking to boost its support in Chungcheongdo province, where there are 27 seats at stake. The minor opposition People's Party is focusing on the Honam region, a traditional liberal stronghold consisting of North and South Jeollado provinces, putting it in direct competition with the Minju Party. The candidates have just 13 days to canvass voters and spread their messages, so the battle is just beginning. 신세민, Arirang News.
Now, one of the key observation points ahead of the upcoming race is whether the liberal opposition parties will join forces to improve their chances of winning against the ruling Conservative Party. Our Park Ji-won has the responses from all three sides.
The prospect of an alliance between the liberal opposition parties has become one of the most hotly contested issues in the run-up to the general election. Speaking to reporters from various points on the campaign trail on Thursday, the leaders of the three main parties offered their thoughts on the matter. Ruling Saenuri Party leader Kim Moo-sung said any move to unite the opposition before the election would make a mockery of the public. The Conservative Party chief said that a political party is meant to be a group of people sharing the same identity and ideology, and the public will not buy an opposition merger because of their recent split due to ideological differences. He added that if the parties were to unite before the election just because the odds are against them, it would be very myopic of them. The main opposition Minju Party once again urged the minor opposition People's Party to join forces with it, saying it is the will of the public. Former party leader Moon Jae-in said those who would block a Liberal Party coalition would be committing a sin against history. Interim leader Kim Jong-in also said the party will fully support any moves to put up a single Liberal candidate. However, People's Party leader An Chol-soo once again rejected the proposal, saying if the Minju Party really wants to unite the liberal opposition, it should withdraw its candidates from the races where they are in competition with one another. An left the main opposition party back in December and has been advocating that a viable third party is necessary to overhaul Korea's political system. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
This story in development, South Korea has issued a warning against GPS disruptions in the country's northern region, saying they appear to have come from North Korea. Now, this amid news that North Korea may be beefing up its surveillance along the border with the South. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
South Korea issued a warning against GPS disruptions Thursday evening on Seoul, Incheon, and the surrounding Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces.
A South Korean official told local media outlets that the North have been sending the GPS disruptions to the country's capital area since last month, and they reached their highest on Thursday. The authorities say this may be because North Korea is currently sending actual GPS disruption attacks to the south upon completion of a testing phase. As of Thursday 9 p.m. local time, there have been no damage reports from the South Korean military on its equipment due to the disturbance. The move from the North follows as the regime has been allegedly beefing up its military presence along the tensions-prone border with South Korea since the end of last year. An anonymous South Korean military official told local media outlets that North Korea has set up some 200 more observation posts. The meters-high North Korean concrete structures could hold 1 or 2 soldiers and surveil the demilitarized zone area through telescopes. The move from Pyongyang is seen as a measure to pressure Seoul's military and gain the upper hand along the border. But there are also speculations that the North is trying to increase its surveillance for its internal interests, such as preventing its own people from defecting the state by crossing the border to the south. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Korea's Constitutional Court rejected a challenge to the country's ban on the sex trade, handing a defeat to prostitutes who have campaigned for years to decriminalize their work. But the court was more divided than in past rulings upholding the ban. Our Chi Myung-gil has more on a ruling that will surely stir controversy in the nation.
Korea's Constitutional Court upheld a law that toughened punishment on voluntary prostitutes and their clients, as well as procurers. 6 judges ruled that the anti-prostitution law was constitutional, while 3 ruled the law unconstitutional. The anti-prostitution law was brought before the Constitutional Court in 2012 after a woman who was indicted for having sex in exchange for money asked that the matter be reviewed by the High Court. Under the law, it is a criminal offense to voluntarily sell or buy sexual services, which can carry up to 1 year in prison or be fined up to $2,600. But for those who are forced into prostitution, they are ruled out from the punishment. In a court statement, the Constitutional Court said voluntary prostitution could violate the prostitute's autonomy and fuel explosive growth in sex trade. Therefore, the government could deny such individual rights to prevent exploitation and protect moral values. The court also said the numbers of brothels and sex workers have been on the decline since prostitution has been criminally punished. However, judges who oppose the law said that even if prostitutes become voluntary sex workers, they should be protected and guided by society and not be criminally punished. They also added the law has prompted a thriving underground sex industry. Since the anti-prostitution law was first legislated in 2004, 7 cases have been brought to the High Court. Chi Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Think again before you light up that cigarette is the message from the Korean government. Some very graphic images will be displayed on cigarette packages by the end of the year here in Korea. Now, cigarette packs will now display pictorial images of people and body parts that have been hardly affected by smoking. Kim Mo-gyun has the details.
The Korean government on Thursday revealed 10 graphic images showing the side effects of smoking that must be displayed on cigarette packages starting the end of this year. The Ministry of Health and Welfare decided on 10 draft cigarette warning images at a meeting today in central Seoul, which includes a diseased lung, a hole in the throat, and rotten teeth.
We chose the pictures based on medical grounds and case studies. We try to focus on the facts, whether the diseases depicted on the pictures are directly related to smoking.
The ministry plans to submit the final list of selected images by June 23rd, and cigarette manufacturers are required to use the images on their products from December 23rd. Images must occupy more than 30% of the front and back of packaging, and cigarette companies have to change the pictures every 18 months. Such moves come as a revised health law came into effect last year, requiring tobacco companies to display stronger warning messages and pictures on their products. Over 80 countries around the world have adopted cigarette package warnings, with the number expected to hover above 100 by the end of 2016. Canada was the first to adopt the policy in 2001, using 16 images that cover almost 75% of the package. It saw the number of smokers drop by 12.5%. Australia also participated since 2006, displaying warning images that cover up to 90% of the package. The country also implemented a plain packaging system that bans tobacco companies from displaying any other information and decoration aside from its brand name. With many countries adopting stricter measures to reduce smoking rates, experts question if the new law in Korea would be effective and sufficient enough to bring about change. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Could it be another false dawn or the start of a gradual recovery of the Korean economy? The country's manufacturing output rose at the fastest pace in over 6 years in February, while business sentiment also improved. Hwang Ji-hye has the numbers.
Korea's output in the mining and manufacturing sectors was strong in February. Statistics Korea says production in the sectors rose 3.3% from the previous month, marking the fastest pace of on-month expansion since September 2009. The rise came on the back of a pickup in demand for semiconductors, a sector that saw production spike. Demand for mobile chips has risen as Korea's biggest tech giant Samsung Electronics released its new flagship Galaxy S7 smartphones. Adding to the optimism, central bank data shows that manufacturers' business sentiment rose for the first time in 5 months. Still, experts are doubtful about whether the robust figure will last.
The effect coming from chip makers could be temporary. Apart from that, export volume also rebounded in February, but it's mainly coming from the increase in workdays, as that was a leap month. The growth rate of the export volume is not even that big, so it's hard to say exports are picking up pace.
And although the overall industrial output that includes all of the country's sectors rebounded in February, it's a mere uptick, as output growth and domestic demand dragged down the rise in the manufacturing sector. Retail sales dropped nearly 2% from the previous month.
It's hard to expect a drastic improvement in domestic consumption, as consumer sentiment has withered a lot.
In fact, Korea's central bank says the amount of excess funds held by households and nonprofit organizations hit a record high last year, meaning that people are saving instead of spending amid the lingering economic uncertainties. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
The G5, the latest smartphone from Korean tech giant LG Electronics, hit the shelves on this Thursday. Reviews? Well, the phone's innovative features could make it a big hit with consumers. Our industry correspondent Kim Min-ji looks into whether it could help LG smash the dominance of Apple and Samsung.
Fun is what LG Electronics is promoting with its new G5, which hit shelves on Thursday. With the price tag of roughly $700 in Korea, it's the industry's first modular smartphone, which means users can connect various add-ons to instantly improve camera or sound functions. Aside from the modules, other accessories provide the user with an entirely new experience.
With the 360 cam, I can capture everything around me thanks to two 180-degree lenses on the front and back of the device.
LG says it was thinking outside the box this time around.
Our aim was to get away from the conventional smartphone and give users an experience they've never had before. We'll continue to develop unique products to differentiate ourselves from the competition.
And so far, LG seems to be on track, with the majority of consumers who've tried out the product already satisfied.
I like that there's two types of lenses that can take both wide and original shots. It's easy to change from one mode to another.
It's an extremely modern design, so I think many young people will like it. I need to change my phone soon, and it's impressive enough for me to consider it as one of my options.
But will it be enough to turn the tide? LG's local rival Samsung Electronics recently began sales of its new models, while Apple has released lower-end smartphones in emerging markets. On top of that, fierce competition from Chinese rivals has eroded LG's share in the global market. Analysts say although the G5 turned out well, it all boils down to how many units LG can shift.
It remains to be seen whether the older generation will buy the G5 due to the modules. Besides, the market is already saturated, so a lot depends on how well LG can appeal to and target the people planning to switch phones. Now that Samsung's phones are already out, LG should use this time well to market its products before Apple releases its next iPhone.
The early popularity of the G5 will likely help LG turn a profit in the second quarter of this year. But analysts say down the road, the company with the best two-track approach, namely expanding production of lower-end phones while turning a profit from high-end models, will be best placed to ride the wave of the flooded smartphone market. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Rescue workers are scrambling to save people after an overpass under construction collapsed onto moving traffic in Calcutta, India. Bruce Harrison is live in the studio with me to discuss the situation. Now, Bruce, at least 14 people are reported to have been killed. Now, police believe as many as 150 people remain under the wreckage. What's the situation like now?
The government, Kanyang, is working frantically right now, and they've dispatched some different groups out there. But as you mentioned, that number of likely trapped people is so high that they expect the death count to increase. The government sent disaster response forces and soldiers to speed up the rescue, but it's struggled to get heavy lifting equipment onto the scene.
Our biggest challenge is rescuing the huge number of people who are trapped under the debris. Because there is a lot of concrete, we are using cutters of all sorts to making holes so that we can make an entry.
Residents and police joined the rescue, with some trying to hand bottled water to trapped survivors. Some people have been pulled out alive.
I gathered some other residents, some army personnel, and with some help from a crane, we were able to rescue the man.
Construction of the overpass began in 2009, and it's missed several deadlines for completion. Construction projects in India have long been plagued by poor safety standards. For the first time in the history of the United Nations, candidates will compete openly for the world's top diplomatic job. According to The Guardian, contenders for UN Secretary General must explain their ideals and intentions before the UN General Assembly next month. The Daily also reports many candidates will hold public debates in New York and London, where they'll be questioned by individuals and civil society organizations. Current UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon steps down at the end of this year. The major powers on the Security Council have always privately chosen the new leader before presenting their choice for General Assembly approval.
Bruce, last month, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said that it would be actually a very good idea if a woman led the United Nations. Whose names have we seen so far?
Well, there's a campaign dedicated just to highlighting outstanding women in the world who could be considered. That campaign, Women SG, has some official nominees. That includes Irina Bokova, the Director General of UNESCO, and Natalie Gehrman, who has served as Moldova's Deputy Prime Minister, and some other top government jobs.
Well, why not? But it should be very interesting to see these key figures really race for that top post at the United Nations.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Bruce.
My pleasure.
Well, it's about that time of the year when beautiful cherry blossoms blanket the nation here. For more on that and the weather update, let's head right over to our Lee Ji-hyun at the Weather Center. Now, Ji-hyun, some of the biggest cherry blossom festivals are about to kick off very shortly here in Korea.
That is so right, because April is the month of cherry blossom festivals here in Korea. And one of the biggest ones in the nation, Jinhae Gunangje, is only one day away from opening, as well as Jeju Island one. And here in the capital, over in Yeouido, will open next Monday already. Now, today was the mildest day of the season here in Seoul, with a high peaking to 21.4 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow it's going to be even milder than today, peaking to 23, but morning lows will start out in the single digits, so be extra careful of big temperature differences. On that note, let's move on to tomorrow's temperature readings. Here in Seoul, we'll kick off at 8 degrees Celsius, while Busan and Jeju will start out at 11. And as for the daily highs, Seoul will be topping out at 23. Gwangju will also see a high of 23, while Daegu and Daejeon will be topping out at 24. Now, over in Washington, D.C., where the Nuclear Security Summit is currently underway, the city is also covered with beautiful cherry blossoms, as you can see from the photo behind me, taken at the U.S. Capitol. Warmer than average temperatures will continue in Washington, D.C., with a mix of rain and clouds in the forecast for the next couple of days. Now that's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Just a note of reminder on this Thursday night, in less than 25 minutes, the South Korea-U.S. Bilateral Summit takes place in Washington, D.C. And during our midnight newscast, we will connect live with our Song Ji-sun traveling with the Presidential Press Corps from Washington. That is our broadcast on this Thursday night. I'm Moon Geon-young. Thank you as always for staying with us, and we hope to see you same time tomorrow, right back here on NewsCenter.